Hey guys, thanks for coming. If you went to hockey games in the 1970s and 80s, you definitely were familiar with a few people that we have on our broadcast here today. In 1972, Ren Blair brought a professional hockey team to Saginaw. They played at Wendler Arena. It's at Saginaw Civic Center. And we brought three local legends here that played for the Gears back in the 70s. Warren Holmes from Beaton, Ontario. He was drafted by the Los Angeles Kings in 1977, 85th overall. He played 3 years for the Ottawa 67s, 10 years professional hockey, 5 of which with the Saginaw Gears. When he played with the Gears, he played in 293 games played, 134 goals, 152 assists, 286 points. In the playoffs, he had 29 games, 18 goals, 23 assists, 41 points. In the NHL, he played 45 games for the Los Angeles Kings, 8 goals and 18 assists. Warren retired in 1985 and 86 seasons. Thanks for coming here, Warren.
JJ, my pleasure. Thank you for having all of us.
Hey, no problem. Next up, Dave Westner from Toronto, Ontario. Dave played 10 years of professional hockey, 5 of which were in Saginaw, 380 games played, 152 goals, 201 assists, 353 points, 44 playoff games for 21 goals, 22 assists. Dave retired in 1985 and 86. Hey, Dave, thanks for coming.
Hey, JJ, thank you very much for doing this. This is quite a deal here with what we're going through, so thank you very much.
Oh, no problem. And last but not least, Dennis DeRozier from Kirkland, Ontario, a Saginaw County Sports Hall of Fame member. He played 13 years of professional hockey, 10 of them were in Saginaw. He had 450 games played in Saginaw, 275 goals, 244 assists, 519 points. He appeared in 75 playoff games with 47 goals, 44 assists, 91 points. He accumulated 2,196 penalty minutes in his pro career. He was practicing self-isolation at that point that we're all doing right now. Hey, Dennis, thanks for joining us as well.
Yeah, my pleasure, JJ.
Hey, guys, a lot of reasons we're doing this is Saginaw hockey right now. There's a lot of questions that people don't know the history of it. And you know what? One of these guys, as a guy who really valued the Saginaw Gears and what they did, not only for myself and everyone else getting to watch you guys play and what you guys brought to the community, there's a lot of interest in the Gears. My son's team did the Saginaw Junior Gears. It was crazy. We'd go into barns all over, and they'd say, "You guys are." They remembered the old IHL team, and you know it was really really nice to see. So, Dennis, tell us a little bit about what the scene was like at the Saginaw Civic Center in 1972-73 seasons.
Well, we were an expansion team that year, JJ, and we were probably the best last place team you'll ever see. We had a lot of characters. We had a lot of really good hockey players on the team. And Ren Blair put a team of guys from all over. I came from the Eastern League in Clinton. We had guys like Elgin McCann and Romanensky came from, and Hornby came from New Haven. And Ren was the general manager of the Minnesota North Stars, so they had drafted a bunch of players that ended up in Saginaw also. And it was really a good team. We were adjusting to the league, and a lot of players went on and had great careers after that year.
You mentioned Ren Blair. His claim to fame was that what did he do with Bobby Orr? Did he sign him to his first professional contract, or was he the scout who noticed him?
Well, I think he scouted him and then got him signed. So Bobby Orr was Ren's not only hook, his only hook to hang his hat on. He was general manager of the Minnesota North Stars also. So he actually had a really strong career in professional hockey.
Oh, nice. So, Dave, you came to Saginaw in 1975 and 76, and by that time, the Saginaw Gears had an identity with the IHL and the Saginaw community. Talk to us a little bit about the identity that the Gears had that you came here from Seattle.
Yeah, I came here in '75, JJ, and they had as Rosie mentioned, they had a core group of guys that have been here for a couple, 3 years since the team started in '72. And, from there, Fred started, well, Don Perry, we call him Fred, but Don Perry started tweaking the lineups and bringing in different guys here and there. But the main core group of guys that they had, like Marcel and Stu and Rosie, that went a long way to building that team. They had played a couple, 3 years in the league already, and they kind of knew what they needed to do to win, and so they started building around that, and that was a good deal.
And Warren, you joined the team in '77, '78, which I think was a year after they won the first Turner Cup. What was your first impression of Saginaw and professional hockey in Saginaw coming from the OHL and beating Ontario?
Well, yeah, and a couple things about that, JJ. I had just come out of Ottawa that we had won the OHL that year and gone to the Memorial Cup, and I was drafted to LA and went to training camp and got sent to Saginaw. And I can remember driving across the border at Port Huron and asking at a gas station, how do I get to Saginaw? And they didn't know. So anyway, I ended up here, and kind of funny about that, Westy was roommates in Seattle with my neighbor that I grew up with in Beaton. And Larry Gould, who played in Port Huron at the time, had told me, when you get Saginaw, look up Dave Westner. So he was the first guy I looked up when I got there. But honestly, my very, very first impression of it all, and the guys will get a laugh at this, was Gunnar Garrett walking into the locker room, and there he was being Gunnar and being, there's two teams here. There's the A team or the B team and the C team, and, see you later kind of thing. So that was kind of my first impression, but it was always a good impression. It was a great arena, a great barn to play in, and you could see that initially just walking into the Civic Center at the time.
Hey, Dennis, the first Turner Cup in 1977, you guys had a lot of really good guys on that team. Marcel Como had a great career here. Paul Evans, who I didn't really see play much, but I've got to know quite a bit through some of our Canadian Open days, and Mario Lassard. Talk a little bit about that 77 Cup run and some of the different characters on that team.
Well, as Westy had said, Perry started and he was building a team. He and Blair were building a team to win, and that's why they brought in the people that they brought in. Initially, the core that came in when Ren started it was a good core, but he needed to build around it. That's when he was bringing in guys like Dave Westner. Homer came in. Blair had connections to LA, and he just started putting little pieces together. Mario Lassard, great goaltender, and he started just building and building and building, and then finally we were ready to win. In '75, we had a pretty good run, but we weren't quite ready to win. In '76, we now were ready to win. He put the pieces in the right places. He got all the personnel that he wanted, and we were real tough that year.
Now, talk a little bit about Marcel Como, because Paul Evans made a Facebook comment. He said he wanted to know who the toughest center that you played with was.
Well, of course, it was going to be Crow, Paul Evans. No, but you know what? It's funny. A lot of people, and that was a tough league to play in. There was a lot of really physical play. Everybody had tough guys, and it was hard to play in that league. And when you got a guy like Marcel, and Stewie kind of fell into that category too, they were brave. They were competitors. They played in an era where you had to be really, really tough to succeed, and they did very well in that environment. And it doesn't show up on the score sheet on the penalty numbers, but they were brave. They went out there every day and competed, and it was a tough time to play, as Westy knows, and Homer too. But Westy, he didn't have a lot of fights. I don't think I ever seen him lose one, but he was very good at it when he decided to do it. And he kind of owned a guy from Toledo named Tandardini. I don't know why Tanner thought he could beat Westy, because Westy tuned him every time he tried him. Nonetheless, it was a hard time to play, and there was a lot of good, tough hockey players. But again, guys like Stewie and Marcel, they didn't show up on the penalty list that much, but they were tough competitors.
So Dave, we talked a little bit. We hit on Don Perry and him putting together. What was a coach in the '70s role? Like, what would you say made Don Perry a successful coach? Because I think in the '70s they were coaching a different type of hockey player, a different type of game. So what made Don Perry a successful coach back then?
Well, mainly it was he got Rosie pissed off. So Rosie would go out and fucking fight him. Oh, excuse me. Rosie would go out and fight everybody. But no, Fred's job was, as we mentioned earlier, was fine-tuning, putting the guys in the place that he wanted to. He kind of knew what he needed to do that way. And you either played his way, the way he set it out for you to play, or you didn't last long here in Saginaw. There was a lot of guys came in and tried out and tried to stay here because we had a good team. But if they didn't play like Don wanted you to play, you didn't stay here very long.
So Warren, what's your favorite? You played for Don in a few different leagues. What's your favorite Don Perry story?
Well, there's lots of them. I actually ended up playing for Fred for 7 years. And I don't know if there's anybody out there that can say they played 7 years for Fred. I played with him in Saginaw. I played for him in New Haven. I played for him in LA. Probably Fred, his nickname was the BCM, which was the big crazy man. And Westy will know this. My rookie year in Saginaw, things went really, really well, and I scored a lot of goals that year. And probably a little bit bringing daughter. A little later in the year, after things were going real, real well, and it was getting easier, we were playing something one night. I don't know who it was, but Westy was my right winger, and I can remember coming back off of a shift and sitting down on the bench, and Fred coming up, and Westy was sitting right beside me because we've laughed about this many, many times. Fred taps me on the shoulder, and he leans over and he says, they called me Shooter. He says, Shooter, if you don't hit somebody the next shift, you and I are going to go right here, right on the bench. Obviously, the next shift, I was like a pinball. I hit everybody out there. Just, he had a lot of respect from us players, and he was a big crazy man. He scared the crap out of you. You had to play for him, and as Wesley said, if you didn't, you didn't play in Saginaw.
One of the things that Ken Schuler put on the Facebook is he remembered, and Ken was an all-ice official many years for the Saginaw Gears. He remembers a time that Fred challenged another coach up into the concourse area, where all the players ended up on the concourse and two coaches. You guys, were any of you guys on the team then?
Can I speak to that? I don't remember Fred doing that, and he may well have done it, but one of the guys on this broadcast did it with a former guy at Muskegon that played in the NHL by the name of Rick Lee, because I was playing, Westy was probably the assistant coach, and I was up in the concourse there going, what the hell's Rosie doing now?
Easy, Homer, easy, boy.
I
tell you,
I got thrown out of that game. It was funny.
One time we were playing Kalamazoo, and Perry walked through the room and he says, I don't want anybody to come on that ice until I tell them to. And we thought, what the hell is going on now? And we're peeking out the door. He went out and he challenged the entire team. And we're going, well, should we go out or should we stay? And we're going, he said stay, we better stay. We don't want him taking us on. But
Well,
he was the kind of guy that you wanted to play for because he did that kind of stuff. He expected you to play hard, but he didn't expect you to do something that he wasn't able to do himself. And that's why it was so easy to play for.
one point on that that Rosie was just speaking to was in Kalamazoo, and we were in the locker room, and all of a sudden the crowd was going crazy. And as Rosie said, Fred told us to stay in the locker room. He was standing on the bench, 1 foot on the bench where we sat and one on the boards with a stick in his hand, swinging the stick at the players, of the Kalamazoo players, as they were skating around the ice. So that, if you remember that, Rose.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Again, do we go or do we not? I say not. We'll be on the list.
That's great. So Dennis, one of the things that a lot of guys asked in the Facebook questions is, number one, who was the toughest opponent you fought, and who was the toughest teammate as a gear that you had?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. As I said, everybody was tough back in those days, and it didn't necessarily reflect in your penalty minutes. It just reflected in your playing. But I think probably the toughest guy, and just off the top of my head from the years I played, had to be Big Archie Henderson. I mean, I love the guy. He played for me later on. He's a great guy, great team man, everything. But boy, he was about 6'6" before he put the skates on, and he showed up with a bad attitude all the time, it seemed. So you could hardly do anything with him. He was so huge.
What about as a teammate? John Gibson's name got brought up a lot. Did you ever play with John Gibson, or was that later?
I did. I played right at the end of my career with Gibby, and he was one of the guys that was involved in that fracas with Milwaukee when they pulled out of the series because we beat them up so bad. And fortunately, when that went down, I was sitting on the bench, or I'm sure I would have been into it. But one of the funniest thing that happened out of that, one of the goons that Milwaukee brought in was holding Marcel, and Gibby was left-handed, and he skated by him. This was in a stoppage and play, and they were looking to run us out of the series, out of the game. And Marcel was holding on to this guy, and Gibby sucker punched this guy from Milwaukee, some French guy that they had brought in late in the season. And on the way through, his elbow hit Como in the side of the head. And when Como got loose, he comes over to the bench where I'm sitting. He looks at me. He was ghostly white. He looked at me and he said, "I'm lucky to be alive."
Hey, Dave, he hit on that a little bit. You've told me a few times, and I don't think this has probably ever happened in hockey before. Talk about Milwaukee pulling out in that playoff series and not wanting to play you guys anymore.
Well, the main thing I remember is we were quite pissed off about that. We were actually sitting on the bus getting ready to go to Milwaukee for game 3 and 4. And we loved going to Milwaukee. It was, most of our travel was down to a game, play the game, get on the bus and come home. But when we went to Milwaukee, we usually went a day ahead in advance, and we had a little bit of freedom, if you will, before the game, the night before the game. So we really enjoyed going to Milwaukee. And I remember Fred coming on the bus and say, "Unpack, boys, we're not going. They've just pulled out of the series." And a lot of us were not happy about that. And that's one of the strangest things I've ever seen happen in the game.
And they pulled out because you guys were just a lot tougher than them, and they weren't ready for the beatdown, right?
Yeah, that game number 2, when John Gibson kind of did a number on one of their players, and that game had been physical as it was, and we had a pretty physical team, and I guess they just decided they didn't want to go through. They figured they weren't going to win this series anyway, so there's no sense in putting it up with it anymore.
Nice.
Toughest team, JJ, I ever played on. You start adding John Gibson, you add Dennis DeRoche, you add Mel Hewitt, you add Jim Branton, you add a sleeper by the name of Peter Marsh. You add God, I can't think of his name right now. There was one other real tough guy on that team. That was a incredibly scary hockey team to play against. It was tougher than nails. So, yeah, that was a funny series. I jokingly say we won that 4 out of 7 series 2 straight.
So, and the best part is that it made you guys a lot tougher too, right?
Yeah, well, probably. I think I got thrown out of the first game. I had to fight, and I didn't fight much. And yeah, absolutely.
Hey, so Dave, your next venture after professional hockey, you were a longtime arena manager at Saginaw Bay Ice Arena. What has changed locally in hockey in Saginaw since you've been a part of it, since you came here as a pro, and then you did such a great job at Saginaw Bay Ice Arena? What have you seen change locally in Saginaw?
Well, just first of all, numbers wise, back in the mid 80s into the 90s, our numbers were pretty good as far as the youth go, playing out of the Saginaw Bay Ice Arena. But Bay City then built their rink, and Midland expanded and put another sheet of ice in there for them. And players, the number of players just started going down. And the game changed a little bit in the fact that back in the 70s and early 80s, it was a little bit more physical game, and it started getting away from that as far at the pro level and locally, and got to more of a finesse game, and so it changed a little bit that way.
Okay, and thank you for everything that you did at Saginaw Bay Ice Arena. Part-time worker there. Guys like myself and many of us benefited from all the effort that you put in there. We appreciate it for sure.
Oh, thank you, JJ.
So Warren, playing 3 years in the OHL for Ottawa 67s. What has changed? I'm sure a lot of people around here that go to Spirit games. What has changed in the OHL from when you played to what you see in today's game?
Well, I think the OHL is a reflection of hockey in general, JJ, that it is not near as physical as the game that the 3 of us played. Now, the talent and the skill level is way greater than any of us had. So, that part is exciting, but mostly skill, the size of the kids nowadays, and not just male hockey players. My God, the world of the women's hockey league is exceptional. Dave's got a daughter that's in college right now, playing college hockey. So, that has changed, and the skill has allowed that to happen. And I think that's the bigger change. Truly in the game of hockey, my opinion is the biggest, really the biggest difference is the goalies are so much better today than they ever were when we played.
Yeah, I mean, the equipment, everything is you notice the old videos, pads are smaller, the athleticism and stuff like that, but for sure. So Dennis, you coached the first Saginaw Spirit team here, and last year you retired as a color guy. What's the difference, and how has Saginaw Spirit hockey grown over the last 20 years from when you were a coach to now?
Well, I think it's just pretty much transcended all of hockey. I mean, it's as Homer alluded to, it's not as aggressive. It's very talented. Don't get me wrong. Saginaw has put some good hockey players in the world of professional hockey, and I don't know what the number is now, but a big number of the kids playing in the NHL have come out of the major junior, whether it be the Quebec League, the Ontario League, or the Western Junior League. So, I mean, it's just evolved. I mean, they were okay back then. There was good players like Chris Thorburn had a very long, successful NHL career, and various other guys. But the type of hockey, I think, is not quite, although it very, very skilled, not quite as exciting as it was back when we played, because you never knew what would happen back in the old days, right down to your coach, and not just Don Perry, but guys like Teddy Garvin and Lemieux and Kalamazoo. I remember one time I'm skating by the Kalamazoo bench full speed in a game, and he threw a handful of ice cubes in my face, and I did a boat turn and went up, tried to get on the bench with him. But I mean, that kind of stuff would never ever fly in today's hockey, and I think it's like in Saginaw, it's a little bit tough because they don't have the as a whole the background as maybe a team like Peterborough or a town like Peterborough would have with their hockey, or Oshawa or somewhere like that. So it's a tough sell, but it's outstanding hockey.
And you had a player play for you that's had a really successful media career, Paul Bissonnette. I don't know if you've heard about what he's doing on Spit and Chicklets.
Oh, yeah.
But
I've talked to Biss. I'm happy for him. He's a great kid, great personality. He got to play some hockey. He made it to the NHL as a tough guy, which I didn't particularly see that when he played for me. But you got to do what you got to do, and I respect him. He's seen what he had to do to get to the National Hockey League, and he did it. And I give him a lot of credit for that. And he used that as a stepping stone into the media now that he's got various things going and quite successful at it. So very happy for Paul and glad he's doing well.
So Dave, you've talked to me a little bit back in the old IHL days. There were, a rule where you had 3 fights and you were out. You only had 3 lines for 2 right wingers. There was a certain somebody that played right wing on your team that if you didn't want to play, you used to take advantage of that 3 fight rule, right?
Oh, definitely. But more so, whenever I came into camp, I really didn't want to come in too good of a shape because I have to thank Rosie for this. We only had the 3 forward lines, and he usually got himself in a situation where he was sitting over on the other side of the ice in the penalty box, which put us down to 2 right wingers, and I was always doing double shifts. So I figured that's how I was going to get in shape. But, I have to thank Rosie for that.
Well, Wesley, I can say this now that our coach, Don Perry, Fred, has passed away. So there's no way of you checking on this, but every year at the first of the year, Fred would call me into the office and say, look, Rosie, I got to get Westy in shape. You're going to have to take more penalties.
Well,
that's not true, but it's my story.
No, but I can believe that because I remember when I had retired in '79, and then I came back at in November of that year, and in fact we were sitting, I do believe, at your bar, Larry's Lounge, and this was just before Christmas, and Fred came up to me, and we hated getting cornered by Fred, of course, you know that, but he came up to me and said, Berger, don't you think it's about time you got in shape?
So with that, guys, listen, you talk about that. A lot of you guys stayed here throughout the off season in Saginaw, and off season today, guys do a lot different things. You guys seem to have a true identity in the community, playing softball around the area and things like that. Getting in shape was training camp back then. Now guys come in shape in training camp. So like your off season here, what was your off season? Golfing and just hanging out?
For me, I played a lot of fast pitch softball. I didn't really play a lot of golf back in those days. I wish I would have filled up the summers more, but yeah, we just we played a lot of fast pitch softball, and we do some stuff around the city, around the town for the hockey team. But we were so well taken in the first couple of years that we're so well known. We were treated better than I'm sure better than lots of pro teams. We had everything there. I mean, we had everything but money. We didn't make a lot of money. We had a lot of recognition, a lot of fame, and it was really a great place to play. It really was.
So Warren, what was the best part of playing in the NHL, or some crazy experience that you had in LA going from Saginaw to New Haven, then to the big city of Los Angeles. It had to be a total culture shock for you, or something that happened to you when you were in LA.
Well, nothing really stands out. I think what happened when I went to LA was probably a reflection of the two guys that I'm sitting here talking with, that they taught me how to be a pro hockey player very young. You know, keep in mind, I'm way younger than those two. And they took, yeah, that's a dig. And, but in all honesty, when I came as a rookie, they taught me how to be a professional hockey player. And for that, I am grateful for them and other people. And, you know, I really can't think of anything crazy that happened in LA in and of itself, but you know, it was I was there for half a season.
Okay, I have to interrupt you, because didn't you hang out with one of the Eagles there for one night?
Well, one night, yeah, there was that night, but that was in a bar with yeah, that's my Glenn story, my Glenn Fry story, that I have had no idea who Glenn Fry was that night, but
Well,
it was,
in all honesty, Homer, you probably don't even remember that night. So
no, well, actually, yeah, probably not, but no, it's a fun story, but it's kind of a long one. But the bottom line is, he had short hair then. It was the Miami Vice, Glenn Fry, and I had no idea. And I was with Doug Wilson, who's now the general manager of San Jose Sharks, and him and I ran together when we both played in Ottawa, and I hadn't seen him in a while, and we were in the bar after, and he had his buddy Glenn there, and I didn't know who Glenn was, and I was getting a ride home from somebody else, and they said, how'd you get here? And I said, oh, some friend of Doug Wilson's named Glenn, and they kept saying to me, don't you know who Glenn is? And I said, yes, it's Glenn, he's right there. And they went, oh, that's Glenn Fry of the Eagles. So, yeah.
Nice. So Dennis, you coached a couple guys here that were pretty good goaltenders, with Ed Belfour and Darren Pang. Both went on to very successful careers. One is a Hall of Fame goalie, one is a announcer. You have any good stories about Belfour or Panger? I mean, and by the way, I don't know if you know this, Pang did throw you under the bus on Spit and Chicklets on a story about you. Did you hear that one yet?
No, what did he say?
He said that he was playing in Saginaw, and the coach went and took 2 bags off the bus, kicked the guys off the bus, and it was Mel Hewitt and another guy, got into a little bit of a scrap with them, came back on the bus and said, all right, let's go. So
that was me. Hold on. That was me. The scrap didn't happen on the bus. It happened in the locker room.
Right. Yeah. He said it was outside the bus. You threw the bags off the bus, and they had to go or something.
Tell Panger he couldn't stop a beach ball with an ironing board, all right?
Well, and you know what? Tell Panger that we had a 7-0 lead that night and ended up losing the game 9-7, so nobody was happy.
I was particularly unhappy. But no, Panger, he was a good little goaltender, but his size was really restrictive for him to play too long in the big leagues. But he's like Bissonnette. He made a great career out of his opportunity, and he went on to do great things in broadcasting, still doing them. And Eddie Belfour, what can you say about him? Hall of Fame goaltender. I mean, he I don't want to say he's a little offside, but Eddie, he marched to his own beat, and he could stop a puck, though. I'm not going to mention the name, but we had 3 goaltenders at the time. We had Clifford, Reed, and Belfour, and they were all here fighting for playing time. And the coach of Chicago at that time called me and asked me how they were all doing. And he told me, in the midst of the conversation, he told me that he didn't think Ed Belfour would ever be an NHL goaltender. And I told him, I said, I got to disagree with you that. on that point. I think he's going to be an outstanding goaltender. And of course, the rest is history. And I mean, Eddie, he was a goaltender. That's all I'm going to say. He was a darn good one.
And Ed and I became friends, and one of the stories that I heard from a former player is you guys used to have a brick, whoever made the brickhead play of the game, and Eddie got it for mishandling the puck, and when they handled the brick, what did he do with it?
Oh, he stood up and he threw it overhand the length of the room, and he had guys ducking and diving. He was not happy. I forget who brought that. I think it might have been Jeff Pyle initiated that bonehead play of the league, and you got presented a brick. And I mean, it was just something, a team thing. I'd forgotten about that, actually. Just kind of a little team bonding thing. Well, it was all fun and games until you give it to Eddie, then you got to dive for cover.
Yeah, probably the most competitive guy that I've ever met in my entire life, and that's why, you know, you talk about guys that earn their success, and he earned the success through hard work, focus, and all that. And you know, we had a lot of guys like that. Brian Noonan that played on that Saginaw Hawks team, you know, played the Mike Keenan way. He played for you for a little while, and it seemed like we always had good goaltenders around here.
No, we really did. The minors, the IHL was a great place to develop goaltenders, primarily because they got a lot of work. And we put a lot of goalies out. Frozy, Keynes, guys like that. Just
Palmatier, Mike Palmatier.
Yeah, Mike Palmatier's another one. Just all kinds of great goaltenders. And it was a good league. It was very competitive. It was a hard league to play in. It was all-time hockey.
So Dave, one of the things that I thought was always successful in the Saginaw was you guys were always visible in the community. You guys always did a lot in the community, out to local spots as far as Papaletios, Larry's Lounge, a lot of things like that. And I think that's what made you guys successful in this community. Guys identified with you. Talk about some of the things that you guys used to do as far as off the ice to make yourselves known, Dave.
Well, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You know, the guys had to get out and get in the community. We had a core group of guys that had been here for several years. And our PR department for the Saginaw Gears did an outstanding job as far as having us go to schools, sitting at McDonald's, signing autographs or whatever. In fact, the guys used to come in. The weekly report would be put up on the wall at the beginning of the week where you had to go that week, and the guys came in and would always look at that and be a little disgusted that they had to go somewhere. But all in all, we did it, and then we were happy that we did do it because we were out in the community. We got to meet people; they got to meet us. And another thing that happened back in the 70s was a lot of guys didn't wear helmets. So the player identification for the fans, as far as seeing you on the ice playing without a helmet, they could recognize you more easily that way. So I think that went a long way towards the community getting involved with the players, and we had a good group of fan clubs. They'd go on the road. They'd follow us on the road. It was always nice to see them. You know, you go into an enemy building and you have your core group of people there. So it was always nice to be out in the community and get to know them.
So here you go. Here's an old Polaroid right here of one of those events you're talking about. I don't know if you guys can see it. Can you guys see the Polaroid there?
It looks like Mark Toffolo and Dennis DeRozier.
And the young guy in the GSHA jacket.
I can't see that.
Hold it up a little.
That's probably you, isn't it?
Yeah, I was scared to death. I used to go to those photo ops at McDonald's and all that stuff, and I've got 1 foot forward trying to get out of there with those guys. It's frightening as can be.
You know, Wesley, you're talking about community involvement. One of the things that you don't see in any professional hockey league today is Monday nights it was initiated by Don Perry, our coach, and he wanted you to get together as a team whether it be go out and have a couple of drinks or go out and eat or whatever. Well, we were all young and single and crazy. It turned out that Perry would initiate the fact that we'd go out as a team, and we did. Well, 9 times out of 10, you probably had one or too many Miller Lights, and then you had to pay for it. You had bag skate on Tuesday morning, but you didn't really think about that Monday night because you were having fun with your teammates. So, but all that has changed in pro hockey now.
Yeah, and to speak to that, Rose, a lot of people didn't realize we played, most of our games were Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So Monday was considered our Friday night for most working people. And I think we did a thing called the State Street Crawl, if I remember correctly, where we
Exactly.
we would go out the end of the State Street and come back towards Larry's and hitting every bar we could along the way. Now, of course, we had designated drivers, so that we don't have to worry about that. But yeah, we hit a lot of the bars on our way back in, and that was Monday night. And then you're right, Tuesdays were not a lot of fun on the pond.
But that was all initiated by the coach. I mean, he wanted us together, and at that time, with the way hockey was, it was great because you were close to your teammates, and you end up paying for it Tuesday morning, but you ended up in pretty good shape.
Yeah, for sure. We gelled. That's the way we gelled off the ice, and so we went to battle to each other because we knew each other pretty well, and we wanted to work for the other guys.
So a couple of guys that we talked about earlier, and I think you guys have told me some stories about the guy that would skate the hardest on those Tuesdays, that would party the hardest. Talk about Paul Evans the next morning on those Tuesday skates. Warren, do you have any Crow stories? Or
you know what? I never played with Crow. I will tell you, though, that the first person I met on an airplane flying from Toronto to Los Angeles for my very first training camp was Paul Evans, and I met him there. And but I never actually played on the same team as Crow, so I'm going to defer to the other two guys.
Well,
but I have some Crow training camp stories.
He was Wesley centerman.
Yeah, he was my centerman, so I got to know Crow pretty well. And in fact, he became Rosie's centerman the following year, I do believe, when I played with Homer. But Paul was the type of player that he played real hard during the games, and so on Mondays he had to let off a little steam, and he really enjoyed himself on Monday nights, so much as sometimes we'd have to take him home because he couldn't get himself home. But Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning practices, there was no player that worked harder than the Crow on the ice in practice. You know, he was hurting. You could tell he was hurting, but he worked his butt off. And I give Crow a lot of credit that way. He was a fantastic hockey player and great centerman. And his work ethic was matched by his off-the-ice effort as well.
And he also made it to the National League with Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Had a good pro career. So one of the guys that when I grew up that we always talked about as a kid, we still talk about, and I got to play some men's league with him and against him, Warren, and he's stuck around Saginaw. Do you have any good Mel Hewitt stuff for us?
Mel, oh God, yes, Mel. Mel came in the year after my second year, and Mel was. You know, you talk about tough guys, and Mel's right up there with, you know, the guy I'm looking at right now in the blue shirt, and the late John Gibson, by the way, who just passed away not too long ago. Mel was, and Archie, and I played with Archie. Archie was a right winger, like both these guys were for me. Mel was as tough as it comes, and I think the Mel deal that made Mel crazy, maybe Archie a little bit crazy, is they both loved to fight, but sometimes they didn't want to fight, so they just club you over the head with a stick just to save time. You never knew which way they were going to go. So Mel is a wonderful guy, and just passionate on the ice and tough as nails. And he could play a little bit. He had a good shot. He could score some goals. And just all in all the time. No matter what Mel did, he was all in.
I'll tell you what made Mel extra tough over a lot of hockey players is if he got into a fight where he wasn't doing as well as he had in other times, you couldn't hurt Mel. The guy could be pummeling him and hitting him 4 or 5 times in the melon, and Mel would just shake his head and go right back at it. So he was a hard man to hurt. And but Mel, like you said, Homer, Mel is a wonderful guy. I see Mel occasionally here in town, and he's a very nice man.
And Peter Horchek told me a story about a puck hitting him in the head and going to the top of Salt Lake City, and they didn't know who shot it or what. And again, the puck didn't phase him there. It hit him.
You know, I was coaching that game, JJ, and what had happened was Big Mike Brown was on my team, and they were coming out of their end. Milwaukee was, and they lost the puck at the blue line, and Brownie's about 6'6". Before he puts his skates on, he reaches out and he puts holds the puck in with his long reach, and he stepped into it and let a slap shot go. He hit Freddie Berry, who was playing for Milwaukee, in the toe cap, and went right off Berry's toe and hit Mel in the forehead and went about 40 rows up in the what was it called there, the Mecca, and Mel took one look at Freddie. He took one look at Brownie, and he started at Brownie. Brownie puts his stick out to, pointed at him to defend himself. Mel shakes his head a bit, comes to his senses, and Mel skates over to Fred Berry and says, "Berry, you ever do that again, I'll kick the crap out of you." Mel, it hit me in the foot. What am I supposed to do? But I often wondered what would have happened had Mel not stopped and went after Brownie and they had a fight. Would I be short 2 men for 5 minutes? Because they were both on my team.
So if we're telling stories along that lines, how about the night in Grand Rapids where the Grand Rapids emptied the benches against the referee, and we're all sitting on the bench? Should we empty it to help the refs? And Fred said, "No, you guys sit here." Remember that night?
I do remember that, Homer.
Yes, I do.
That was a crazy night.
Oh boy, we had a few of them back in the day.
Well, I don't know if you guys were on the teams. I remember when the Generals, I think, went into the stands above the locker room, the home locker room, and some different things. And people don't realize that stuff like that happened back then. Were any of you guys on that team or in Saginaw when the Generals went into the stands?
That was probably the one I mentioned earlier, JJ, where we went into the stands. That was against I'm pretty sure it was Rick Lee that was coaching. And for some reason, I remember Kevin Shamahorn on that team, which I played with Shammy here in Houston. But that was probably the night that happened.
Well, I think JJ's talking about Flint in Saginaw, and that was a fella named Bob Phillips that went into the crowd. I was actually playing on that team in Flint.
I was in New Haven then, Rose, I think, when that one happened. Pierre Giroux.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that play. I remember also a time in Kalamazoo when our players went up into the bleachers. I do believe Gordy Malinowski was not playing that game, and he got into it with the fans. And we saw the ruckus going on.
I think he was going after Arcandia, because remember Arcandia jumped him in Saginaw and broke his cheekbone?
Yeah.
Earlier that year.
Yeah.
And he was going over there, and we all ended up in the seats and trying to save Gordy.
Yeah.
A meet and greet, meeting the fans.
Gordy Malinowski is always one that people talk about. I never really remember watching him play, but they say that he was one of the toughest guys, and he's a smaller guy, right?
Not tall, not small.
Right, not tall. There we go. Vertically challenged.
Very not necessarily that tough. He'd stick somebody in the ear if he thought that he should. But what a great teammate he was. Great guy.
Yeah, he was our captain the year that we won the Turner Cup, and like you said, Rose, he was a great team player. He brought the guys together off the ice, but on the ice he was scary in the fact that if one of the wingers would come down and try to go around him, if they were going to beat him, then you were going to get the stick. And I remember explicitly one time in Muskegon when a young guy tried to go around him, and the stick got up in the guy's throat, and the kid was lucky to be alive. Actually, lucky to be alive that we had Gunner on our bench, because their trainer kind of froze, and Gunner was on the ice in no time and had that kid's tongue pulled out of his throat. If you remember that, Rose?
Yeah, I do. The kid played in Saginaw prior to that. Briefly, his last name was McGuigan.
Okay,
Bobby,
yeah, Bobby McGuigan.
Yeah, good kid, good player. But that's the way Polish played. I mean, it's. I mean, we all know it going in. Everybody in the league knew it. So go wide if you're going around them.
Yep.
Hey, do you guys have any good stories about each other that we would like to hear? I mean, feel free just to jump in with something.
I have nothing on.
None that we can tell. We all have kids.
And speaking of which, all three of you guys raised daughters in Saginaw, stuck around here. What made you stay here in Saginaw after your playing career?
Well, personally, I got to know I got to know quite a number of people away from the ice arena, and there's a lot of nice people in this town, JJ. Got to meet them all. I've been friends with a lot of them. I went in business with 4 or 5 of them, and just there's great people in this town. As we mentioned earlier, the fans here were super, and I personally like staying here, and I like being involved in this town.
Yeah, same with me, Westy. Met a lot of nice people. I enjoyed the off season. I enjoyed playing fast pitch softball here. I also got into business here with some local fellas, and it was basically it was home now. Where I come from, it's 320 miles north of Toronto, so you couldn't just jaunt home for the weekend. You were a long way. So I decided to make my life in the U.S. and in Saginaw in particular, because I had a lot of friends there, and it was a great little town to live in.
Yep.
And you're responsible for bringing Jim Nightingale to Saginaw.
I will not take credit for that.
and Westy and I were there the day he showed up at the door.
Yeah.
No, Nightingale and I grew up together, and he was a musician in Toronto. He used to come down to our games, and then one day he just decided I think I might try it full time. So he showed up
for a weekend, though, Rose. Right?
Pardon me?
He came initially for the weekend and didn't leave.
Yeah, that's. I always tell people, don't invite him over for dinner. You may never get rid of him.
No, he comes to my house for dinner. He brings 1 bottle of wine, drinks 3 bottles of wine. That's his name here. He still does. He'll bring 1 bottle, drink 3. So that's okay.
On top of that, he's still a great guy.
And the owner of the sawmill now. So that's great. So hey guys, listen, we've went a little bit longer than I thought we would. I appreciate everything that you guys doing here. This is the first time that we've tried this, and for you guys don't know, I've got a little thing that I do with called Bamberger Hockey, where we do episodes for kids training, and we've been doing some virtual stuff with kids because they're all in self-isolation, trying to just keep anybody entertained. And you guys were such a huge part of the Saginaw hockey community for a long time, still are. People always talk to me still to this day about the Gears, about DeRozier, Westner, and Holmes, and you know what? I appreciate you guys taking your time with us.
Well,
No
JJ,
problem.
thank you. JJ, thank you very much for putting this together. It's really neat to sit here with DeBosier and Homer and just rehash some of the times that we had, 40 some odd years ago. So I just want to say thank you very, very much, JJ, for putting this together.
No
Yeah,
problem.
me too.
Hey,
Yeah.
we got guys we're doing this from Texas, Saginaw, and Dennis, where are you? North Carolina or South Carolina?
Hillsborough, North Carolina.
I mean, how can four dummies figure this out? We'll broadcast it later for people to see. I mean, that's just
Absolutely
pretty
amazing.
impressive.
Well, we have a big triangle. We're about 1,500 miles apart on a triangle.
Well,
Uh,
hey, great for taking the time, guys, and maybe we'll do it again. I appreciate it, and I'll be posting this on YouTube and Facebook, and hopefully your family, you can share it with them, and it'll be going the shameful plug of the Bamberger hockey stuff here, and we'll go through and share it on that Facebook page and some other stuff, the platforms. But thanks a lot. You guys have a good night, and
Thanks, JJ.
I'm freezing. I had to put over the bald head. I put the Gears cap on. We'll
Good
talk to
job,
you guys later.
JJ. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Very good, JJ.
Yeah!